Hey Tracy, how's it going?
I am great. We were just talking about you. Did you hear
Oh, I did. I was hearing just a little bit. I was.
us? um, so you logged on exactly at the right moment for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with Degree Free.
Sure, sure. I would love to. And thank you so much for having me on. I was really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh,
Um,
we are so excited about it.
oh, great. Well, yeah. So basically, the way I started Degree Free goes back quite a bit. It goes back to my experience in high school, which was one that I think a lot of young women experience, which is, you're good at English or you're good at science or you're good at biology and you get good grades in one specific subject. High schools give a very limited range of options to experience what you may be good at, just by the nature of high schools in general. And so I was pigeonholed into become an English professor or become a lawyer because I was good at arguing and writing. I had a soccer coach who was very influential in my life personally. He actually walked me down the aisle at my wedding. That's how close he was to me. And he ended up having a heart to heart with me one day. I think it was my junior year, and he just said, "You don't need to be here. You're bored. Get out of here." And he told me to dual enroll at a local university. And so I did that. While there, I took a lot of different classes, and I ended up writing an opinion piece for an economics class. And the professor did not like my opinion, not my syntax, not my grammar, not my citations. Nothing was wrong with it structurally. But she did not like what I wrote. And so she held it up in front of the class and basically just gave me a tongue lashing for my opinion. I took this op-ed or I took this opinion piece to the university paper, and the editor, I think, just got a kick out of the fact that I was 16 years old. And so he liked the piece. He said, "Hey, do you want to write for the university paper?" So I ended up being the youngest paid writer for this paper. But I proceeded to encounter that sort of closed mindset all over campus and found to my disappointment that that was not where all of the educated people were. I still don't know where they are, but I don't think that they're very often on college campuses. So I ended up leaving. I left. I remember the moment I decided to leave was in the middle of a sociology final, and I just went, I can't sit here for one more second. So I just tore it in half and I threw it in the trash and quietly walked out. And that was that. I worked a ton of different jobs, and then my husband Ryan and I opened a fairly successful cosmetic or paramedical tattoo shop in Honolulu. It was the top one in the state, and then COVID happened. During that time, I had to retool into a different job because I had to pay rent on this studio while Ryan was in training for the fire department, and we still had to pay rent even though we were not allowed to take clients. So I just went through very methodically, what income did I need? What schedule did I need in order to be able to run the studio, but also keep it afloat? What sort of work environment did I want? Remote, in office, what have you? And then what income did I want to make? So schedule, work environment, income, and location. Then I went and looked for careers objectively that fit that. And when I did that, I found that there was a tech position that was accessible by certification. And so I went and got the certification. It cost me $362, and it took me approximately 45 days, not just to learn the skill, earn the cert, and then apply for the job and get hired. But after I did that, I proceeded to ask at the job what other certifications I could earn. They told me which ones. I also went and studied for those. And I'm talking flashcards. I have them around here somewhere, but it's a stack. It's several feet high. These index cards that I learned all of the vocabulary and the definitions of words. And then I ended up from there working in AI and machine learning for years. And then as I helped other people reverse engineer their careers, like friends and family, then we started Degree Free from that. So that is the origin story of Degree Free.
It's amazing. I mean,
It's quite impressive.
well, right. I was just going to say, I mean, the way that you speak, you sound like a really educated person.
Oh, well, thank you. I actually am very passionate about the fact that education and college are not synonyms. This is something I go to war about in my comments very specifically, oftentimes, but college and education are not synonyms. They never have been, they never will be. No amount of trying to take over education, which is accessible to everybody, Colleges cannot do that. I will never let them win that war. I will not let them own that. And it seems that that's fixing itself, not from my end. It seems like they've done a really good job demolishing their stewardship over that anyway. So at this point, it seems like, it seems like the public has already realized that that's just not the case anymore.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I could say you seem to be an intellectual and having that type of a mind and also against getting degrees for good reason. I think that you speak for yourself on your platform. It's good. It's great.
I thank you. That's a really kind thing to say. I think that there's a new world forming where people are able to be. I don't know that I would say I'm an intellectual for sure because I don't think I'm that smart actually. I just think I'm able to see things that maybe other people don't see, and a lot of that is because I have the time and the luxury to be obsessive about a specific topic. Which, if you think about it, that's what scholars used to do. And so you don't have to be right all the time. You don't have to be an expert on every subject ever in order to be a scholar in a specific subject. I very much care. I read every study. I read every book. I read so many comments. I watch and constantly am trying to keep track of what changes are happening in the workforce globally in the US and what's going on in colleges and then the structuring of the debt. And so because I'm able to obsess over these intersection of these seemingly disjointed things, I think I'm just able to see things coming maybe that other people don't see. But I definitely, yeah, that's a really kind thing to say, though. I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. I aspire to that. But I think a lot of it is just being able to observe the trends and just watch what's going on and have a more objective view of what is causing what.
I actually I started to go and watch a lot of your reels that you have on your Instagram. And I thought, I maybe shouldn't watch anymore because I want to be surprised. I want the conversation to be engaging in a very genuine way. But I absolutely am such a huge fan. I have 4 children who are grown. We have 10 grandchildren now. And I didn't want my kids to go to college, but not for the reasons that you're saying specifically. I didn't want them to leave their parents' home and go into a brand new world they'd never been associated with, where I knew whether nobody was willing to say it. It's sex, drugs, and alcohol,
Yeah.
and you're paying a huge fee, whether my husband and I would be paying it, whether the American taxpayer would be paying it, or whether they would be going into debt themselves. It just didn't make sense to me
Hmm.
at all. And I just could not get behind it. So I love what you're doing. I absolutely love it. I actually am doing, I don't know if you ever heard of it, but Peterson Academy. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, I have actually. Yeah.
I have it. I love it.
Oh,
You
cool.
can choose your courses and it's more it's a hybrid, you know?
I have seen advertisements for it. My opinion is interesting. I think in that a lot of people believe that what I talk about, and you've probably seen this a lot. I apologize for getting notifications. A lot of people will talk about, and nowadays too. I believe this is such a lazy. I really do feel like this is a lazy thing to say. It's just a program response that young adults learn when they're in college, and this is anti-intellectualism. Every time I just talk about the fact that there's an $848 billion industry whose entire motivation is to prey on minors and get them to sign bankruptcy exempt loans. And that to me is just the height of irony. It's just a little bit too much for me sometimes, and I'm just going, yeah. And then the response of, oh well, people just want to keep you uneducated and you'll just be a cog in a corporate machine. And I just go, what do you think happens when you have student loans that you must pay off?
Yes, and
What
now
is
you're
it
a master to the debt.
what is it about student loan debt that seems freeing to you? Because notoriously, bankruptcy exempt debt is just really good at opening doors for people and
Right.
making them free to try things, free to build what they see, free to even learn. And that's something too about the Peterson Academy. But I actually am very passionate about education, and I mean actual education. I don't mean college. I mean
Mhm.
people learning art and music and foreign languages and thinking critically, learning dance, learning pottery, learning anything that enriches their life in a meaningful way, which is that is what education is.
Right.
And I fail to see how putting young people uninformed in bankruptcy exempt debt is going to help them have the free time to read, the free time to think, the free time to create, because they do not now have the disposable income to pay for speaking classes, language classes, dance classes, all the things that would give them community, that would give them actual education, that would create the well-rounded citizenry that supposedly college is supposed to create. Anyway, I just saw something the other day, and not to get political on you folks, but I just saw something the other day that there was a it was something about the membership of the Democratic Socialists of America, and 45% of the members of the Democratic Socialists of America are college graduates who make between $30,000 and $60,000 a year. It's very obvious that we are creating a class of people who are trapped, feel they're educated when they're actually not, but
Mhm.
are now unable to be financially successful or actually educated. And that it really seems like a crime to me, because these people did want to be educated.
Right.
That's why they went to college. And now they are not able to have either of the things, either of the outcomes that college promised them, which is the ability to be educated and to have that time, to have that mental space, but they also don't have the ability to be financially free or independent because they have so much debt and it's dictating all of their decisions. It's no wonder that there's so much social unrest. It's no wonder that it's no wonder that people in that age group want free healthcare. They want, subsidized rent, and they want student loan forgiveness. Like, the only avenue open to them now is to take money from people who did not make that same decision and then redistribute it amongst themselves to be enlightened, to be fair, to be, whatever they think is right. But yeah, it's interesting how I think our society seems to be pushing back on that, though. College enrollment is declining pretty significantly. And young men are not going. That's the biggest drop in enrollment recently, is young men are not going to college.
Well, that's one thing that I think about all the time is like my husband's a mechanic and it took him probably a good 10 years to fight his way to making a good salary, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
And like the turnaround in his shop of mechanics coming in, there isn't. So the trades, like that's one thing that terrifies me is if these people don't start doing trades again, or if people don't start going into that line and integrating it into like even high schools to get people to do that and it not have some kind of incentive, because once we don't have anyone doing those things, what does our world look like? We're in trouble.
Well, the nice
And
thing
these
is
are all
that
things that can be, most trades you
learned
can
or
learn in
trade.
less than a year,
Yep. Yep. There's a
and you
few,
can probably
yeah.
get it done for free.
Yes, that is one of the things I think is attracting young men, because they can see one. Also too, I've heard so many stories. I had this mom sign her son up for our lunch program. He had gone to college. I think he had like a 5.0 GPA. Smart kid, obviously, right? He was able to pass all the test scores, but that's not the reason he was smart. It was speaking to him. If you speak to somebody for a few minutes, you can tell he was very bright. And he sat on that call with me and he said, I'm working full time. I was going to college because I thought I needed to get a good job. And I finally left after my required sociology class professor tried to make us do an interpretive dance. It's literally like a humiliation ritual for young men. I'm not, it's ridiculous. It's the things that they're making them do in order to get a piece of paper that they do not need
Right.
to be financially successful, and that if they do, has a very good chance of making them unable to be financially successful. And so it's cool because I just had a mom too that put all of her triplets in our lunch program. So three boys she has, and she put all three of them through. And it was because she wanted they did want to go into the trades. All three of them had ideas about wanting to go into the trades, but they weren't really sure which specific trade, which is definitely something I see a lot. Is there's a lot of the really obvious trades. You got like, you have the welders, the plumbers, the HVAC, electricians. Everybody knows about those. And not to say that those aren't high paying and in demand. My youngest sister was actually a structural welder, so I know that they do well. She owns a home, and she's Gen Z, so very much like, very much
Proof.
doing well. Yeah, very much doing well in life. And it's interesting because I think a lot of young adults don't realize that it's not just those big ones, though. There's so many other jobs that
Right.
are like not technically blue collar, so I call them baby blue collar jobs. I heard that term a while back and I've adopted it. I don't know who came up with it, but they were very bright. I like that term a lot. Baby blue collar jobs that are things like, fiber optic installation or low voltage systems like security or automation systems for industrial or commercial properties, things like that. Audiovisual companies, things like that. That they're definitely a trade. Like there's some electrical knowledge, there's some technical and mechanical knowledge, and you do things with your hands, but it's not necessarily outside or heavy work,
Mhm.
and so there's quite a few of those too that I think a lot of people don't
Yeah.
know about.
Well, I am not a fan of college. I hope that none of my children go.
Can I give you some
Share more.
advice? Don't
Share
tell them
more.
that. I have noticed the more degree-free
Don't tell
parents
them.
I've talked to over the years, don't tell them that you don't want them to go.
Okay.
Don't do that because it will make them want to go. That is
Well, we
something too.
heavily talk about trades in our
Yeah,
home because all three of my boys are tinkers. Like they are always like, and
sure.
they're switching to a school this year, which I feel like is coming on the horizon. Like they can, by the time they graduate, they can graduate with a trades license
Yep.
through a little Votech center. I'm like, that is brilliant. Why
Yep.
do so many people not take advantage of this?
Well, I think a lot of people don't know, and I think a growing number of people are. I had a really interesting call from a couple of parents who are in Chicago, and it was probably one of the most interesting calls I've ever been on, simply because these people did not even, and I'm going to try to say this in such a nice way, but it was just like, it was a wild experience to be on this phone call. So I grew up like low middle class. My dad was in the military. My mom was a nurse who was a full-time stay-at-home mom while we were young because we were moving around so much, and my dad was deployed. But these people from Chicago, they were both, they got on the phone and they told me that they had no idea what trades existed, but also they didn't even know anyone in the trades because I think that they were so far removed from trades that even the people that they interacted with to do things like, I don't know, get their cars fixed or get their house fixed, I think they had like a house manager. So they didn't even know, they don't even talk to the people that do the trades. And I just went, wow, that would be really overwhelming. And their son was adopted and he just said, his name was Teddy. And they said, well, he wants to go into the trades, but we don't know anybody or even know how to know anybody that goes into on how they would go into the trades. I was like, that was the most interesting conversation I've ever had. But yeah, that was a wild one for sure. But yeah, I think there's quite a bit more awareness. But man, the other thing is that I think one thing that I am kind of worried about with the trade conversation though is that I think that a lot of young adults, if they express that they do not want to go to college, or if they say that they do, and their parents try to offer alternatives and they say trade school, the child immediately stops listening because they don't see themselves as going into one of those big four, like welding, plumber, electrician, or HVAC.
Mhm.
And also even thinking about what other options there would be in there is just they just don't want to do it because they're like, I don't want that job. So they don't even delve into it. But there's so many other jobs that are like tech jobs, sales jobs,
Right.
medical jobs. Like I myself worked in AI and machine learning. I worked in product and which is basically a marketing and design job. That's not something that requires a degree either. We've interviewed really successful people on our podcast in the past. Drake Porter was one. He was a product manager at Meta, making $500,000 a year, 23 years old with no college degree. We've got people working in information security at Nike or a software development at Twitch. And more companies are removing degree requirements. I actually just saw in South Korea, which is one of the countries with the highest rate of people with degrees. They are the most papered country in the world, and they are starting to remove degree requirements from their engineering and R&D roles in chip manufacturing. They're hiring high schoolers, which is something I've said for years was going to happen, but you see that happening in the US too. So like defense companies and tech companies tend to be on the cutting edge of hiring because they have the greatest need, because they have the most profit from good talent, because there's so much money thrown at them. So when you see what tech companies do or what engineering companies do, they tend to be a lot more forward thinking in their hiring, and when they make changes, other companies are a couple of years away from making it. So, like Palantir has openly come out and said, and I'm not talking about the morality of Palantir, but like they have
Yeah.
openly come out and said, we want you here. Don't go to college. Just apply here. We want you. And then you think about who's in that. Like Palmer Luckey is a very, very he's an engineer. He's an engineer, he's a designer, he's a marketer. He doesn't have a college degree. He was homeschooled and he just built projects and now he owns a huge engineering company. Even in the AI race too, if you look at who's in the AI race, then you look at Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg. Neither of them have college degrees. They were able to get into their desired field really early, and that experience is very key. And I found homeschool families have a very outsized advantage there because they can structure their kids learning really early. But man, the whole country's shifting. Less
Oh,
than one
for
in
sure.
five jobs even mention degrees at all in the job listings. It's not a lot.
I think it is. I keep rethinking about what you said at the start that I think you said you did a list of three. How much do I want to make? What hours will I be available? And what kind of training do I
This
need?
backwards.
Well,
Can you guys see this? This is backwards. Oh shoot, this is backwards for the live. Location, work environment, income, and schedule. I use the blocks to illustrate this usually, but there's four. We call them the degree free four. These are the biggest factors when choosing work for young adults. So
tell
location,
me the four again.
so where they want to live and build their life.
Hmm.
Work environment, which is what type of work environment they want to go into, be that in an office, with people, without people. Are they okay working outside, inside? Do they want to work remotely? Do they want to go into a hybrid position, which is they go in a few days a week, so they are around people, but sometimes they work alone? That type of thing. And then we have income, which is obviously how much you earn, and then schedule, which is when you work. Now, the important thing about these blocks is that they're not necessarily in order. The order will change for every young adult. So, for instance, if you change these blocks around, sorry, these guys are backwards for anybody watching the live, but if you move schedule to the top, this would be your child's biggest need. So, the more filters you have, the less career options they have. But the more filters you add, the less that they'll have. So, for instance, if you have we've clocked we've clocked about 57,000 different types of occupations, which is probably the most exhaustive list of anybody in the country. That's one of the things that's
Hmm.
most interesting about what we're doing is building like proprietary databases that nobody has ever created before, which I'm unbelievably excited about. And because that's the biggest disconnect is, and the parents will see this too, is they don't know what careers their kids can go into. And so a lot of the times when parents are choosing what their children will do after high school, they're choosing by what avenue they will use. Like, oh, they could go to college, they could go to trade school. And it's like, whoa, 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 go back. What career are they trying to get?
Right.
Because what career meets their needs, or what set of careers, so that you can determine based on what's available near you what makes the most sense and will get them to the life they want the quickest. And that is how at degree free, that's how we help young adults choose work. Like you'll have some kids that'll be like really really worried about the income. That's their number one goal. But some kids, they don't want to leave their hometown, and so it'll be income and location. Those will be the top two. Like I have to live here, and in order to live here I have to make XYZ, because maybe they live in a area where the cost of living has risen, or they want to buy a home within a certain timeline, and so they'll need to make a certain amount, things like that.
I think it is utterly brilliant. I think that is it's so enlightening for a person to discover that about themselves. What things are most important? Because to me, when we were raising our kids, there is there's a verse in the Bible and it says, raise your kids how they should go, and when they're old they'll not depart from it. But when you
Hmm.
go a little bit deeper, it says, raise your children in their particular gifts and bents. That means
Hmm.
we need to understand who our kids are. And that takes them being willing to communicate with you and you being willing to engage with your children in ways. And that is what those four blocks reminded me of.
Hmm.
You're going to learn who your children are. They're going to learn who they are. And then you could take your maturity level and lead your children in a path that will give them the best option for success.
Hmm.
I love it. I've never heard anything like it.
Well, I think a lot of it is because the way our whole system is structured is so even homeschoolers oftentimes will take the way they structure curriculum and goals from public schools. And for a very long time, really since 1965, which is when the Higher Education Act passed, that's when the incentives changed to sell degrees to everybody, because that's when the government started subsidizing student loans. Now, a lot of the reason that that happened was because after World War II, there that was when the GI Bill started to become a real thing. So they gave out the GI Bill after World War II. So after World War II, all of these guys came back war hardened, and they took the GI Bill, which they earned with the service that they gave in World War II, and they came back and they went to college. Now, back then, the colleges were not, they were really only for a select few professional degrees that were legally required. And then they were just for people who were very deep diving into specific scholarly topics about niche things. Now, the colleges, having been underappreciated because they were colleges, and so most of the work that they did was not towards the professional degrees, but was towards that, broke scholars. Like that was a thing. The elbow pads is because their clothes were so threadbare that they patched the clothes. They patched their clothes with elbow patches. That's why, academic dress is like professors with the elbow pads. That's where it comes from. Like they were writing, but also they didn't have enough money to replace their clothes. Um, and so they loved getting finally like some notoriety. They loved getting the government money because now there was money in the colleges when there hadn't been previously. But they, as what usually happens with government things, is they got addicted to the money. And then when the money dried up after the GI bulge, which was the tail end of that was, in the 1960s, they, and all those men, by the way, went to college for things that legally required degrees like medicine, like becoming doctors or
Mhm.
becoming CPAs or becoming architects or becoming lawyers, becoming engineers, like civil engineers. That's what they went to college for. And the colleges got very addicted to the money, and the governments, academics have always been attracted to the government because it's a good place to get money. That's just kind of the nature of their relationship. And so then they passed the Higher Education Act, which allowed the government to back the loans. And when that happened, the incentives just got wrecked because it's a blank check, and of course they're going to write it for the max amount of money possible, and they're going to find people to sell it to, even if it has no function for their life, even if they don't need it. And that's when the colleges started to create degree programs that nobody needed. But also, what happened at the same time that they passed this Higher Education Act, and then a few years later, the Vietnam War happened. And so it was send your kid to college or send them to Vietnam. And of course, you would send them to college instead of Vietnam. Like, of course they did. And so that's basically what happened. And it created this false sense that college was the reason that people were successful, not necessarily. And a lot of that's just because there were less jobs that required degrees, but then the amount of people that were going to get degrees for jobs that required them was quite a bit less as well. And so it's just, I think that probably the last time there was positive ROI for most people was like probably the mid 1980s. So it's been running on fumes for quite some time.
Yeah, not to keep bringing up Peterson Academy, but
Mhm,
I'm I'm a huge fan. And so Jordan Peterson, the one who created the whole thing,
mhm,
he said just this same thing that you said, that the colleges are just, they are, there's nowhere left for them to go but to be dismantled because they've just lost all their respectability.
mhm.
And
Yep.
without respectability in higher education, I mean, something's going to give in some way. Once it starts crumbling, it will crumble.
Well, it's happening now. The colleges are closing at a rate of one per week. And again, this is something I have a really hard time feeling sympathetic towards, like the college as a whole, as an institution. I do feel bad anytime anyone loses their jobs because that's a very
Mhm.
stressful for anybody. And you don't wish financial stress on anybody. It's very, very hard on people. But at the same time, it's very difficult for me because I see this as justice in a lot of ways, because a lot of the reason these colleges have such big staff is because they were taking money from the futures of young people in a very predatory manner, in a
Mhm.
very fraudulent manner, I feel, and they were bringing their future, they're taking money from their futures and bringing it to the present and then paying themselves a lot of money to do nothing. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, you're going to lose your job. Yeah, your institution is going to close down. You didn't need to exist, and you shouldn't have existed. And the fact that you did exist was just because there was a government incentive for you to charge these kids, and it's really coming home to roost for them. I think too, the fact that there was so much money covered a lot of the cracks as it grew so big, and so there's quite a bit of corruption in academia, which a lot of people know. And I think it's very obvious now with social media, and it's a lot easier to see what's going on at these institutions, what they're teaching, who's teaching, what they're saying. And so a lot of people are just going, yeah, this is not, I don't know what you guys are doing up here, but we're not going to pay you $108,000 to do
Right.
this to our kids. We're just not going to do it.
Mhm.
So trust in higher education. I always put it in quotes because it's not higher education. Trust in academia is at like an all-time low. I think it's like 27% of people have a positive view of academia. The
Oh,
Ivies, only 15% of people view them as like a good institution. So it's not looking super, super bright for them. But I do think that's the only way that this gets fixed is that many of them close. The ones that remain there's heavy scrutiny. There's a lot of oversight. I think it would be wise if they co-signed the loans as well. I think that would be something. I've written a few different laws, like a few different bills. Like the college lemon law was one that I wrote, and it was basically to say that if your graduates do not feel that they have gotten sufficient education, if you're going to promise that, or sufficient employment, if that's your implication, like you have to do one of those two. You can't do neither of them and charge this much to children. It's just not acceptable. And as a
mhm.
society, we need to be way more intolerant of people and businesses doing that to children because it's obviously not going well.
I agree
Well,
wholeheartedly.
and I do also feel like we have just gotten in this like program, I guess, of like, this is what you do. You go to high school, you graduate, you go to college, and then it's this robotic situation that everyone has to do it, and that's the only way. And I do feel a shift of, that's not the only way. Like,
Hmm.
you don't have to go to college to be successful. You don't have to do these things to be successful. That does not rate your intelligence if you made it through a 4-year degree. Like, I feel like as a whole, as a society, we need to get back to that mindset that there is more than one way to be successful. And
Hmm.
this isn't the only way to go to one of these colleges. And, because I'm sure there's statistics done on this. What high schooler that graduates actually 100% knows what they want to do?
Oh, I just read, no lie. We just did a podcast episode on this. It's called Future Shock, the Crisis in Career Navigation. And it was a study that was done about this. And approximately 13% of high school students are sure of what they are going to do after they graduate. Now, I will caveat this. I think that that's not even accurate because oftentimes, for instance, I just talked to somebody and I told a story the other day. It was so bonkers, but this family, this is just the craziest thing. So their son is going to go run track and field. I feel like sports is definitely one of those things that if parents have their kids in sports, they need to be very careful. Youth sports in America is a college debt pipeline, and that is something that people do not realize. Parents will go into they'll go into debt while they're in high school to try to get them like a measly amount of academic scholarships. I think it's less than 0.1% of kids ever go on a full ride. It's not a lot. So it's very unlikely that they're going to get a full scholarship. But then they will spend so much money. I'm talking like tens of thousands of dollars in coaches and all of these things to get their kids into like varsity programs so that then they can play collegiate sports when there's nothing on the other end of that. It's not like they're going to go be Olympians. They're not on an Olympic track. Because if you had the money and your goal and your child's goal was to be an Olympian, that might make sense. Like I can see that being a very rational, logical pathway. But most of the time, it's like, oh, it's his last time to do that, or it's her last time to do that, and she's going to get a little bit of a scholarship, and it's like $4,000 a year at a school that costs 70,000. And she's going to school for business, or he's going to school for sports medicine. Like, I'm going to be a doctor. And you go, do you really want to be a doctor? Like, what do you want your life to look like? And as soon as you ask two or three questions, it all just like falls apart and they just picked it because it sounded good or because it got parents to go, wow, or other people like, wow, that's so great. And it's like, they are not fully informed about what that would look like. They have no idea what debt burden. And then the parents are overspending for the bachelor's degree because the kid wants to be competitive in the sport at whatever college. And then they're not even factoring in the med school debt. And it's like, it's just bonkers to me. So I think a lot of kids that say that they're sure Usually they're going to fall into one of those like big jobs that it's, business. They're going to school for business. They're going to school for something that's like definitely not going to pay off, some STEM degree that sounds impressive, some which, 78, 9% of STEM grads don't even work in STEM. So it's like parents think that that's a safe thing. It's not.
Mhm. Right.
There's a ton of unemployed mechanical engineers right now because they didn't realize what they were going to do with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
In your work, if I could phrase this, I'm trying to think of how to phrase it so it comes out coherent. The work that you do, you have 57,000 jobs available in the United States. You said
Different occupations. So
different
there's, yeah,
occupations.
different occupations.
So, of the graduating high schoolers, whether they're being funneled into college or the trades or not anything at all, would it be something? Have you done something like X amount of jobs are available? You would fit. Do you guys do that guidance? Like you would fit
Mm,
in this category really well. Your personality and characteristics would fit, or is that just back to the
no.
core?
We don't do it that way because if we did, that's closer to how it should be done. But if we did it that way and we put them into occupation without considering all of these factors, so it matters a lot because the way that this shakes down, so if they choose, let's say they choose work environment, okay? So let's say they choose work environment and they really want to work in a lab. Let's just use that example. From there, then we say, okay, and we do make sure. The thing is, when we do the launch program, and we always advise parents to do this, you need to get the answers to all of these as well. Where do they want to
Mhm,
live and build their life? It's okay if they're flexible on location. That helps because now you're looking at the whole country, right? If they're willing to
mhm,
move. But if they're not willing to move, then you're only looking at a specific location. And now you're looking for lab in XYZ zip codes because they want to live near home. They don't want to move away from home. They want to be near their
mhm,
family or their friends or whatever. And then it might be that they need a specific work environment, but they also need to earn a certain amount of money to do the things that they want in their life, whatever that is. So we don't pick by like personality or interest first. That's secondary. The first thing we do is needs. It's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Because you have to be able to put a roof over your head and clothes on your back and food in your mouth. And then you can worry about how you want to do that. Because, if, for instance, how that might play out is, oh, your personality says you would be a great busker. You would be a great unicycle street performer. And that may
mhm,
be true. But if the young adult has goals that require them to make a certain income, then now their life is going to be incredibly difficult and they're not going to be able to get the things that they want because of this high school interest based decision. And that is how a lot of people end up in student loan debt for degrees that they don't need. And so what we do instead is figure out these four things, also take into account any experience they might have, strengths, interests, and then just do an objective search that's usually based on zip code or multiple zip codes, depending on if they're open to living a few different places. And then we help them to figure out what jobs are available that fit their needs in those areas. And then they eliminate by interest. So it's interest second instead of first. Whereas a lot of times now we say, oh, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? Like, what are your good grades in? So it's secondary. And I think that even for parents who do know their kids really well, and we've seen this a lot with homeschooler parents because they know their kids really well because they're with their
mhm,
kids all the time. But still, sometimes for them, some of the most helpful thing is just getting really clear on, like, yes, I want to live here. I do not want to move. Yes, I want to make $90,000 a year. Yes, I want to, I want to have kids in the future, and therefore I want a flexible schedule that I can have now, keep now, work now, build the skill set now, and then pick up later. That's a big one that we get with young women that I feel like is not addressed at all with career planning. It's always, pick your career, go into some help people job, and then good luck. Hopefully that fits into your view of what you want your family life to look like for young women who that is a priority for. That I really hate. I feel very strongly that many women have been failed in that regard. So that's part
mhm.
of what we do in the launch program too. We ask the same questions of young men because some of them also feel very strongly that same pull to be around their kids, which would eliminate jobs that would require them to travel, things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love this. I think this is like going to be, we should pin this and title it for so many of these things you've said. I've never even thought of. And the things that I have thought of, your work and your commitment in which you've already done is so helpful
Oh,
for
thank you.
people. It
Thank you.
is. It's crazy how
Well, I definitely 100% see a need in it, especially because, being a mom, I don't have any kids there yet, and it stresses me out just thinking how to prepare them for these decisions.
The best thing you can do if your kids are young, and this is something that Ryan, my husband, actually came up with because he grew up in an Asian household, and this is very much a real thing where Asian families will just pigeonhole their kids into one of three careers. And it's always like a doctor, finance, engineer. It's usually one of those three things. For some reason, they're not accountants. I don't know why, but it's always doctor. And not usually lawyers either. It's usually engineer, doctor, and then something in banking or finance. And so my husband, he was given those three options as well. And his grandfather, he just talked about this on our podcast. And his grandfather said, like, you're going to go to college and you're going to get a degree in business, and then you're going to go get a JD. Like, why? Just because, no career goal in mind. It's just you're going to go get these things, and then hopefully after 9 years of school, maybe you can figure out what to do with these. That's insane. That's a crazy way to approach this,
Yeah,
because it's such an
that's quite
is
commitment.
isn't that insane? And he told me that story, and it's crazy because like we've been doing this for years, but he never told me that that was what his papa told him to do. And I was like, that is insane because you don't have any goal. But then my mom homeschooled us. But like I said, I went to high school, but I went to college with that same lack of goal. But on the flip side, my parents didn't give me three choices. They just said, you're going to go to college. That's just what people do. It was like being put on a conveyor belt that was just an automatic, oh, you just go here. That's what we call it, the college conveyor belt. But Ryan was like, it's vocational creativity. That's what he calls it. And that is the ability to look and see different work, different careers. And the younger your kids are, the easier this is. So what you're going to do is when you see work being done, then you say, "Oh, look at that. That guy's putting cones on the road. That's his job. Oh, look, do you see that 5G cell tower? Somebody climbs up that to change the light bulbs on the top of that. Did you know that was a job? Oh, do you hear that lady on the radio? That's her job. She's a radio DJ. She goes in at 4 o'clock in the morning and she reads the weather, blah, blah, blah. Everything that you see, everything that you do, just kind of celebrate work and all the opportunities, but also if they're interested in something specific, like then I'm going to use really young kids example, but like if they're interested in skyscrapers or construction equipment, you can say, "Wow, did you know that there's somebody that sells those machines to those construction guys? Isn't that cool? Wow, did you know that there's a company that puts those, if you're in the grocery store, Costco, and the big air conditioning ducts, you can say, "Oh, wow, did you know that somebody put those up there? That's their job." And it's just and then the older they get, you can get a little more advanced, which is, wow, look at that cool sign. Did you know that somebody designed that sign? That's their job, right? And start to have them think more deeply about the work that's around them. An example we have in our book, I actually have it like, I think I have it in our book right here, but like, we have we have an example. This is the illustration, but like there's a plane, and so it's about all of the different jobs. If you go on a plane ride, have your child think about all of the different work that gets done. Like somebody puts the food on the plane, and there's a company that supplies the food. In the video that you watch at the beginning, that the safety video, somebody did the makeup on all of those people in that video, right? That's somebody's job. And you just help them to see that there's work, there's opportunity everywhere. And that's really what's going to help them into the future because
What
then they're not so boxed in.
right? What do you call that? Vocational.
Vocational creativity.
Okay, that's what I have. I love that. That is great. Your husband said I was watching through one of your reels or maybe the start of one of your podcasts, and I had to giggle, and I keep giggling about it. Buying a degree because
Oh,
you have said it too, and it's like
yes.
that puts you. That should put everybody in a different mindset. Like that's not what a university is supposed to be. A university is supposed to be teaching people useful skills,
Hmm.
increasing their the things that they know, their intellect, their critical thinking skills,
Yes.
their ability to sort through things and think things through. And if you're just buying a degree, you know?
Well, I that was something actually buying a degree was something I'll take credit for that one because I told him really early on, I said, I'm going to say this because this is a very important thing for people to understand because when you talk about college now, it is entirely purely emotional for people. And one could argue that all purchases are emotional to some degree and irrational to some degree, even food purchases, even things that we must have. But at the very beginning, language matters. And when you say earning, I'm like, that is kind of ridiculous because you pay for it. And if you don't pay down to every little red cent, they won't give it to you. It doesn't matter if you did all the work. It doesn't matter if you scored the highest. It doesn't matter how much effort you put into it. If you do
Mhm.
not pay them, you don't get it. And that is something that really early on I started saying because it's very important for people to understand that at the base level, this is a financial decision. If you do not have a trust fund lying around, like if it's not a financial decision for you, then great, do whatever you want. you know, and I've consistently said that for years. I'm like, if your family is independently wealthy or you have a trust set aside, like you have a UTMA account, which is what a lot of trust fund kids have that's for educational spend, do whatever you want. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter to you, but or it's not going to impact your life as negatively. Rather, is probably a better example because planning for them is also important because you need to spend that money in an accurate fashion to get you to your goals. But it's very important for people to reclaim that as a financial decision because it's been marketed as not a financial decision for such a long time. And that I think takes away a lot of the power, the emotional power of colleges. And that's why I do it. And you can tell that it needs to be said because when I do say it or when Ryan says it, people get very angry. And
Well, it made me giggle out loud.
and I'm like, I'm not saying, and again, I always say this to people. I'm like, I'm not saying you didn't do work or study hard. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that it doesn't matter how hard you studied or how much work you did. If you don't pay them, you don't get it. That's the
Mhm.
definition of a purchase. And so it's very
Right.
important for people to reclaim that mentality, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have two questions that I want to end with before we run out of time because this
Sure.
has been a blast. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
So, if your child is already in college
hmm
and it's just not working, but that's a scary place to be for not only the child, but for the parents, especially the parents. And
hmm
it's just not going well. What what is your best advice for that situation?
It's very much okay. One, it's incredibly important to figure it out because otherwise, this time is absolutely a waste and it's definitely going to negatively impact them. That's one thing that I think is huge. Also, if you're going to be paying that much money, you bet that and it's funny a lot of times we'll get applications from families to our launch program whose kids are actively in college and what's so interesting I find is and given our service is not inexpensive, however it saves people tens of thousands of dollars and years of time and all of that defeat that happens because what I hate to see is the damage that's done after a young adult is like chewed up and spit out by the college system, which happens to a lot of them. 40% of kids that go to college don't graduate. 62% of high school seniors go to college. 40% do not graduate. Only 22% work in their field of study. And just because they work in their field of study does not mean that they're making their money back or that they like their job. It just means that there's some loose correlation from their degree. It's terrible. It's terrible stats. And then of those who do graduate, 41% of them are underemployed 10 years later. It's like a fraction of people that are getting a good outcome here. And so for parents, because I'll get I remember one recently, she said, oh, I'm a single mom, like I have two kids in college, they're both really lost, so we can't afford to do this. I'm like, you really can't afford not to because you're spending so much money right now and there's no direction for it. Like you don't know that whatever your child's doing is going to actually pay off. And if they're in college right now and you can help them figure out what career they're going into, if it doesn't require a degree, get them out of there and then go pursue that. Like have them go send out applications. For a lot of people, there's probably direct entry into the workforce if you're strategic about it, which is what we do. But if they are going to continue to go, make sure that that whatever that degree is tracks back to whatever they're going to try to do afterwards in a career that fits their goals. Otherwise, it was just a complete waste of time. And it is going to take those kids longer, and they are going to have a harder time, and they are going to get super discouraged and depressed, which a lot of high school, a lot of college students are. So for parents whose kids are in college and directionless, I feel like it's more urgent. It's like your house is on fire. You need to put that out. They need to know where the exit is. They need to know what's on the other side, because otherwise that really is going to just be wasted time and money. And if it's they're taking out loans to do it too, oof, that's going to just cut off. Something I say a lot is that a degree's debt will close more doors than the degree will open. Like debt will close more doors than a degree will open. So many people think degrees open doors, but they don't if it's just directionless debt, which most degrees are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably important to say, this keeps coming to mind as well. This isn't a I have some friends that I feel like I can already hear their rebuttals.
Sure.
This isn't we we wouldn't want our children to be successful. This isn't don't do anything with your life, child. This isn't stay at home in your mommy's basement.
No. No, no,
This
no.
is something that is probably more achievable, less expensive, and will create a path to more peace in your child's life, more confidence in your child's mind, all of more happiness, more contentment. That's what this seems like to me, rather than, oh no, we're not going to college, all is lost.
Yes. And I think one of my favorite stories I heard recently was her name is Susie Welch, and she's a professor at NYU. And I always feel like I'm always beating up on the NYU professors. But she told a story about how she sent her son to school for business, which for me, sending your son to school for business is a huge red flag. Like, don't do that. That's the boy version of I don't know what to do, so I'm going to go to school for business or economics or finance. Do not do that. They do not have a clear vision of what they're going to do. If they want to work in business generally, go apprentice them to a business owner or get them any entry level job. That is experience in business. Going to college for business is not experience in business. And again, this is how people get sucked into. They get the business degree, they can't get a job that's high paying enough, so then they go get an MBA. 48% of MBAs have negative ROI. It's just a crazy, you know what I mean? It's a wild,
Mm-hmm.
wild situation. But Susie Welch, she and her husband sent her son to school, probably at NYU, I'm imagining, for business. He then proceeds to get out. He works for one of these big Wall Street banks, right? Which is the dream, supposedly. Like, this is the goal, right? Everybody thinks that that's the highest achievement you can get. He works there for 16 weeks and then gets fired or quits. I think he quit. And he comes home and he's like, I hate this. It's miserable. 4 to 6 years. Why did we do that? Why did we do this? She said, what kind of life do you want? Again, a question that should have been asked before they did that, because
Mm-hmm.
why is the biggest question to answer before you spend all this time and money. I don't understand why this is like, it's just wild to me that people ask that after instead of before, because it's so much less damage. What life do you want? And then he said, and this is a good thing. I actually tell parents to do this a lot, but ask your child if there's somebody's life who they want to emulate that like they see that person has a lot of time freedom, or they have high income, or they're able to support a stay-at-home spouse, or they're able to run a business, or they're able to have a petting zoo. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But what life do they see that they're like, I would really like to have that life? And then show them the work that needs to get done to get it, and then you'll find, wow, the stars align, and you don't have to push them, you don't have to force them, they just take action, which is something I see a lot with young men. But her son said, the name of the guy that owned the summer camp that he went to growing up. And I'm like, with the money that you spent and the time that you spent,
Could have bought the
you could
camp.
have bought him a summer camp. I literally could have bought him the summer camp, could have apprenticed him to the summer camp owner, could have potentially worked out some sort of deal with the summer camp owner to teach him how to hand off the business, and then buy the business from the owner in a monthly payment fashion, which is something that parents can do. And I just feel so passionately that we're just burning these young people's time. And I just don't see how it's just not working. Obviously, they're depressed, they're anxious, they're unhappy. A lot of them do not see a bright future ahead. And it's because we've told them that they have to go do this pointless thing that most of them will fail at before they even try. And it's not true. So that's the big thing. Ask them what
That,
they want out of their
yeah,
life.
that's brilliant. That could be the golden nugget question because it is brilliant. If you, so something that I have noticed, I'm 56, and like I said, I have 14 descendants under me. And something that I've noticed in my life in my older years, money isn't always people's top priority.
No, it's
Some people
not.
it is, but some people it's not. And some people aren't, so they're not motivated by money. Their money doesn't bring them joy and happiness. The striving for it actually makes them stressed and depressed and sad.
Hmm.
So, I mean, that alone is knowledge worth knowing. Whose life do you
Do you
emulate?
want? Hmm.
Yeah.
Because if you can help your child too, and this is so important because I think that there's a lot of discontent for college graduates because then they go out into the workforce. This is one of the things I think too is should be a big caution to parents. A lot of employers are no longer hiring college graduates. They're actively trying not to hire them because they churn very high. They churn very high because they expect to make a higher wage than market value because they're only qualified for entry level work, but their debt makes them unable to take entry level work because of the pay. And that's something that could be entirely avoided if they go out of high school and they go into an entry level job, because that is the correct at 19, an entry level wage is fine because you're 19 years old. But they get out of college, they've been functionally retired. Because in college, you're basically it's like early retirement. We're teaching these kids like, oh wow, you have so much time flexibility, you have so much this, and they're living on their future earnings that they haven't made yet because they're taking out most of them taking out loans, and so it's just not real. And then it's really tough for them to get back into reality as well because that's not what work is going to be like at all. So you really feel for them because we ruin them, we ruin their expectations, we ruin their attitudes, and then we increase what they think that they should earn because they just paid 108 to $156,000 to get this thing that doesn't give them any skills. And employers don't view them as skilled; they view them as the same as an 18-year-old, and that's really hard for them to stomach. But financially, many of them are unable to stomach that. And so, if you can help your child calibrate their goals with what they're going to earn, that's helpful. Because if your child really wants to work with animals, most of the jobs working with animals, if you're going to work at an animal rescue or something like that, you're not going to earn very much money. But if you have a really realistic view that the thing that's most important to you is not high earning, then you can just live according to your means and have a much happier and fulfilled life. And that is very valid. I had a young lady we worked with who was in North Carolina. She was in a unique situation. Her grandfather had left her a paid off little house on a little piece of land in North Carolina. So not high cost of living. She didn't have to worry about housing cost. She wasn't really interested in having a family. So like she was just, that's just how she felt. And she decided that she was going to be a seamstress, a tailor, because she didn't need to make that much. And also it's a skilled thing that she could learn with her hands. She already had some of the existing experience. And that's something that I've like, she couldn't have done that if she'd gone to college and taken out a ton of loans to get an English degree that she didn't need to do anything. And that is something that I feel like that calibration really early is huge. Because it's like, oh, okay, you want to have more time and you're okay with less money in order for more time and less stress. Great. Now these options are open to you. Okay, you're willing to make this informed decision about what your salary will be, potential for business ownership, how that would look. Great. And much better outcome than a ton of these kids coming out that are like going for biology, they're going for whatever. I'm going to go into sports medicine. You're going to have a ton of debt and you're not going to be able to like do anything. You're not going to be able to buy a house. You're going to feel like you can't have a family. You're going to push off getting married, which are big things that I think a lot of people are. It's interesting. I've noticed that a lot of people, they'll talk about how millennials can't buy houses and Gen Z can't buy houses, and they fail to mention the fact that again, the average cost for a bachelor's degree is 108 to $156,000 that they're taking out at 17 or 18 years old. How do people not track that money going out the door at that time is then not available for a down payment on a house? Like,
Right.
How are they not tracking? How are they not tracking that? I just don't understand how people are not going, oh, that's probably why. People only have so many $100,000 bullets in their life. And so they need to spend them on the things that matter fully informed. And if we as a society move that way, things are going to get a lot better. So, and
Well,
I see that.
I do have a theory that, especially in our current environment, and a lot of people that I know, I tell my kids this all the time. If you guys have a little bit of ambition and passion, I don't see you not making it in anything, because I think
Hmm.
that's one thing that as a huge, like, is a problem, that one, especially 17, 18, 19, and even 20-year olds lack work ethic.
Hmm.
They want to go in making, college degree amount of money, skip the whole entry level no matter what, and then if they don't like it, they just quit. Like,
It
what is
was
happening?
I just saw recently, and I got into a tangle on TikTok over this because I made a video about how college graduates expect to make $100,000 because many of them do. They think they're going to walk into a job that makes $100,000, not realizing. And again, this is just such a failure on the part of the colleges. Like, how do you not teach these kids this? Most of the companies in our country that can hire entry level college graduates are small to medium sized businesses. They make up about 80% of the job listings in our country. The people that own those businesses make a median of $110,000 a year. If the owner of the business that you are going into makes between $110,000 to $200,000 a year, and you, as an entry level college graduate with zero skills, come in and you ask to make half of what they're taking home, and many of the business owners are married to someone who's also working. So it's not necessarily, that's not even the whole business owner's income, it's their spouse that's usually covering healthcare also. And so that's what they're making, right? They own the business, they have all the risk, they've been doing this for years, and you're going to walk in with no experience, a 4 year degree that taught you nothing except for to think that you were worth $100,000 and to be discontent when you don't get it. Why would they hire you? And the answer is they're not. Like, that's what's happening now. And so parents like have a really outsized advantage if their child is young, because if your child is 18 and has graduated high school or even is still in high school, start making moves to find their entry level work. That is the absolute best thing you can do, because even if your child wants to go into business ownership or entrepreneurship, and many kids do nowadays, they still have to work. They need to
Right.
work. And that's something that I'll get kids, especially young men, like, yeah, I want to start a business. I want to start my own thing. I'm like, that's great. What do you want your life to look like? And then from there, you need to figure out what entry level work is going to help them gain experience so that they can get enough reps and start figuring out what problem they want to solve and then how they're going to charge for it and what they're going to do and who they might have to hire. And they have to work in order to get that experience. I could have never started a business until I had worked. I worked a lot of different jobs. I worked a lot of different jobs in a lot of different places before I got to the problem that I wanted to solve and had the experience to solve it. And I think that's a big thing. I'm not saying young people can't start businesses, but if they do, they need to have work experience so they understand what is going to be required and then what it will look like as they want to grow that business.
It's it is just true. And I don't there's just so many things, the disillusionment of American youth, and it's not just one one group's fault. There's so many things at play,
Mm,
I could think of 10 right off the bat.
yeah, there's a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But I
But
don't know. Overall, though, I feel like things are improving, actually. I think Gen Z
yeah,
is going to be okay. I think they're going to be all right. I talked to a lot of
yeah.
them, and I do believe that there's a bright spot. Well, a lot of them have a lot more common sense than I think people give them credit for. I think people talk a lot of trash. I see a lot of clickbait articles about all the problems with them, but then if you actually talk to a Gen Z young adult, they're usually very willing to put in the work. They just
Mhm.
want to see that it's in service of some clear goal, and they want to see that they're going to get something out of it, because that's why people work. They want to see
But
how it's going to help them. And if they don't, and we're doing a bad job, I think, like as a society, connecting those dots for them, like, oh, if you do this and you do this, it'll get you here. And that's what they need. We're just telling them go here, which is college, and then figure it out, I guess. That's what we're telling them. So no wonder so many of them are really, you know, really disillusioned.
Well, if necessity is the true mother of invention, which I think we've seen through the course of time that that's true,
Hmm.
I think that you and your husband's invention was definitely a necessity.
Oh,
And
thank you.
you guys are you're gonna rise to the top of many areas, it seems to me. One of my good friends is a jobs placement coordinator at
Oh,
the local community college. And
oh.
she's like, oh, I have my work cut out for me. And she's not even doing to the caliber that you're doing. She's, in the college with
Hmm.
students one on one. But it's interesting that there wasn't one of her necessarily before she started. I'm like, what do you mean?
Well, parents are getting really discontent, and parents are getting really upset with the fact that they're paying this money and not getting jobs. And again, I feel like the colleges really shot themselves in the foot with that one because there's a lot of pushback, like, we're not job training. I'm like, you claimed that
You
you were,
absolutely
and
are.
and that's why you're charging so much money. Do you think people would pay you this if they didn't think that it was going to get their kids jobs? That's the number one reason that people send their kids to
The whole
college.
point.
And it's very insincere of them to be like, what do you mean? Like, how dare you evaluate us on job placement? You can't sell $100,000 pieces of paper and not get people jobs. I'm sorry, that's not, and you know that. Like, you guys know that. We're bringing you, we're laying this at your feet because you claim that's what you did and you're
Right.
not doing it. So, do
Right.
it, like, put up or shut up, basically.
It
You
is
know,
literally the entire point
yeah.
of going to college.
That's well, it's so funny because I feel like I feel like I get really interesting messages all the time. I get messages from, I get messages from parents, I get messages from young adults, I get messages from business owners who are like, hey, we'll hire anybody that that comes through your program. Like, totally agree with what you're saying. We're hiring salespeople. We got somebody reach out to us not too long ago for a junior software developer, like, apprentice, basically. He was like, yeah, anybody that you have that's qualified, send them through to me. I'll train them. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But this is also interesting because people love to talk about how there's, nobody can get jobs as in software, but if you have the right alignment, then you can. It's just about strategy. But then also a lot of academics will message me and say, yeah, we're definitely, our system is definitely just taking advantage of these kids. They're not getting good outcomes. Like, we know it, and there's nothing we can do about it. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that is what's happening, but I do agree with Jordan Peterson in that the only solution is for it to collapse, which it's actively doing right now. So it's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it has been so great to talk to you. It's been delightful. I
Well,
am
thank
so
you.
enlightening.
I talk a lot, so I very much appreciate it because I talk a lot. There's just so much to cover on this
Yeah.
topic. I always feel like I talk too much when I when I do podcasts, but there's just so many facets of this that I think are
Yes.
really like, complicated, but also the root cause is pretty simple, and it really just goes back to needs, which is, what do they need from their work? And if you can figure those things out,
Yeah.
then it's going to become a lot clearer what career is going to be the right fit. And then you just look for, in your area, based on your resources or your child's learning style, what career training or, you know, education or certification makes the most sense for them, and then what order to do it in.
Well, I seriously, this is going to be a really good resource for people to come back and watch. Really, really. I mean, I have 10 grandkids, but third time I said it. And all of this is such useful information for my daughters and my sons in law because you've really answered a lot of questions that, I mean, I didn't even have for you. So thanks for talking a lot.
Oh, no problem. Well, thank you both for having me on. Tracy, Robin, it was so nice to meet you both.
It was
You
my
as
nice to
well.
meet you too. God
And
bless you.
I've gained skills myself to help my children. So
I'm so excited if you ever make a video about it. One of the things that I love to have parents do, it's in the book, but you can also just get a blank sheet of paper and do this, which is just have them write out all the jobs they know. That's really illuminating because then you kind of know what their world of work looks like. Such a useful exercise because, like, some kids will get, they'll get 20, but you start to see it kind of break down. You're like, wow, you really don't know that, and it's also difficult. A lot of adults really struggle to do that.
right.
And so but it helps because then you can see how over time, as you stretch that vocational creativity muscle, how they'll know about more. And then you can help them
Well,
pursue.
yeah, and I loved your I guess activity, like just even acknowledging all the jobs around you and everything that you do, anywhere you go, acknowledging like that's that person's job. Like
Mhm.
the construction worker, like that's his job,
Mhm.
You
We're gonna be doing that now.
you don't
Oh,
you
it's
I've never had
obnoxious.
the mindset
We
to
do it
do
all the
that with
time.
them.
Yeah.
But I think about those things just because I'm an adult and I'm in the workforce and I'm doing all these things, trying to, make sure they're successful too. But to acknowledge, like, you're right, it's everywhere.
Yep.
Like, all of
Mhm.
these things are things that you could do.
It's
And
true.
that, yeah, it's going to open a lot of doors because once they know, they can't walk through a door if they don't know it's there. And
Right.
so showing them what's there is going to give you way more power when you get later and you get closer to deciding how they're going to launch after high school, because then you can structure also, probably about like 16, you need to start moving pieces in place. And if you have a clear idea because they had more options, they will start to narrow it down like that. And my goal would be that, like, people don't need our launch program. They get this all figured out before that and they never need our help. That's actually the best outcome. That's the
Yeah.
best outcome, is you never need our help at all. But for people that do, that's why we exist. But ideally people just start this really early, then they change their mindset about it, get clear on needs, know all the options, and then knowing your child will help you to narrow down and guide them correctly. And yeah.
Before you leave us, so I'm gonna assume that your book is on your Instagram, or
Yes,
is it
and
on
actually
Amazon?
it's
Or
on Amazon, but on our website it's cheaper, so I suggest doing that. But
okay,
it's called The Degree Free Way: How to Help Your 16 and 20-year-old Build a Life They Want. And actually, it's two books. It's a set, so it's a parent and young adult set. So you do them together because that's a lot of times it feels like a chore if you make them do it. So we did it in a set,
I
and
love
also there's
that.
some helpful tips for parents in there too.
okay, great. That's gonna be a great resource for people. I want all my kids to have that book so
Oh,
that they
awesome,
can guide my grandkids through it.
Well, my daughter is
awesome.
going into 10th grade, and it's all that I can think about is
Hmm.
preparing her. Like, you're not a baby anymore. Like, you have
Yeah.
to start thinking about these things.
It happens really fast, I feel like that sophomore to junior year, and usually we get a lot of young adults that they'll think about doing it junior year and they go, "Oh," and then they come back senior year and they're all panicked. They're like, "Oh
Yeah.
no, we have to do this now because we're running out of time." It happens really quickly. And I think if you
Yes.
have multiple kids too, it's a lot to worry about all the moving pieces. It can be very overwhelming, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, she needs the books.
I know. I want to do that with her.
Yeah. All right,
Well,
Hannah. It's been so great.
oh, thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you both, and I hope you guys have such a good day.
You
Yeah,
as
you
well.
too.
Thank you for having me
Bye.
on. Bye.